Lastly, we are going to go over features of the skull. So features, you guys, are identifying characteristics on the skull. These allow us to identify certain areas of the cranium. Let's say if it was a forensic setting, and maybe the skull was in pieces. These landmarks and identifying characteristics can help us figure out what bone we have and what side it belongs to. All right. So we're going to start with the first one, which is the EAM, which is referred to as the external auditory meatus. This is located on the temporal bone. It is the ear canal. All right, so it's the only canal in the cranium that you guys need to know. All right, and again, it's located on the temporal bone, and you can abbreviate it and call it the EAM. Next, we have, coming back to the anterior view, the mental eminence / protuberance. Again, you can use either term. That would be at the very center of what we would refer to as the chin area. You have some pronounced muscle markings right here that is referred to as the mental eminence / protuberance. So this is a trait that's unique to anatomically modern humans. Only we have this feature. Next is the foramen magnum. So the foramen magnum is this large hole in the occipital bone. All right, so foramen means hole, magnum is large in Latin, so large hole. This is where the spinal cord comes out from the brain and runs down the rest of the vertebral column. Next, we have the zygomatic arch, which can be seen from either lateral view. So the zygomatic arch is formed when the zygoma and the temporal bones fuse together, forming the zygomatic arch, which is your cheekbone. Next, we have the occipital condyles. So again, looking at the inferior view, on each side of the foramen magnum, you have these round, smooth, articular surfaces. These are the occipital condyles. Those articulate with the first cervical vertebrae and allow you the movement to shake your head, yes. Next, we have the mastoid process. So looking at it from the lateral view again, on the temporal bone, directly posterior to the EAM, you have the mastoid process. The mastoid process is this conical shaped projection that is an area of muscle attachment. Next, you have the mandibular ramus. So again, looking at the lateral view on the mandible, this area right here that flares out and has a little bit of a rough patch is called the mandibular ramus. So the next two features are on the frontal bone from the anterior view. First, you have the superciliary arch. This is the area where the eyebrows would be. All right, it's a slightly raised portion on the frontal bone, right above the eye orbits. Next, you have the supraorbital margin. So supra above, orbital eye, margin meaning the edge. So it's the rim of the most superior portion of the eye orbit. So just this area that my fingers are rubbing on. And our last one is the nuchal line. And the nuchal line can only be seen from the posterior view. Looking at the occipital bone, you have this horizontal impression that's left from the neck muscles attaching to the cranium. We call it the nuchal line. Sometimes there's a V-shaped hook here in the center of the nuchal line. All right, so again, running through the features of the skull, you've got the external auditory meatus, mental eminence / protuberance, zygomatic arch, foramen magnum, occipital condyles, mastoid process, mandibular ramus, superciliary arch, supraorbital margin, and the nuchal line. All right, guys, so that concludes the bones, sutures, and features of the skull.